You start waking up earlier. You cut back on the nights out. You read instead of scroll. You say no to things that used to feel normal, and slowly, your life starts to change shape. And then something strange happens. The people closest to you, the ones who are supposed to be happy for you, get quiet. A joke lands differently. A comment feels smaller than it should. Nobody says it directly, but the support feels thinner than before. This is not your imagination, and it is not a coincidence. It is one of the oldest and least discussed patterns in human relationships, and the Stoics understood exactly why it happens and exactly what to do about it. If this describes something you have felt, but never had words for, stay to the end of this video. And if you want more straight, practical Stoic wisdom for real life, like this video and subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next will change how you see every relationship in your life. Number 1. The silent shift that happens when you start growing. Growth rarely announces itself with fireworks. It arrives quietly, in the form of a new habit, a new boundary, a new standard you hold yourself to that you did not hold before. You stop complaining as much. You stop needing constant reassurance. You start finishing what you start. From the outside, this looks like nothing dramatic. But from the inside of the people who have known you for years, it can feel like the ground shifting under a relationship that used to feel stable. They knew the old version of you. They built their understanding of you, their comfort with you, their place next to you, around that older version. When that version starts changing, even for the better, it disturbs something they never had to think about before. Epictetus taught that people are not disturbed by events themselves, but by the judgments they attach to those events. This applies just as much to the people around you as it applies to you. Your success is a neutral event. It is simply something that happened. But the mind of someone standing next to you can attach a judgment to it that has nothing to do with you at all. That judgment might sound like this in their head, whether they realize it or not. If they keep growing, what does that mean about me? This question is rarely asked out loud. It usually is not even asked consciously, but it sits underneath 100 small reactions, a delayed congratulations, a joke that cuts slightly too close, a sudden interest in reminding you of a time you failed. This is not usually cruelty. It is fear wearing the mask of familiarity. Most people are not trying to hold you back on purpose. They're trying to hold on to something that feels safe, which is the relationship as it currently exists with its current balance, its current roles, its current comfort. Change of any kind threatens that balance. Even good change, because good change for you can quietly imply comparison for them. Seneca wrote extensively about how attachment to external things breeds anxiety, and this includes attachment to a fixed idea of who someone else is supposed to be. When you change, you break their fixed idea, and that break produces discomfort long before it produces admiration. It helps to understand that this reaction is almost never really about you. It is about their own relationship with themselves. A person who is deeply secure in their own path tends to celebrate growth in others without hesitation, because your progress does not threaten their sense of who they are. A person who is uncertain about their own direction, whether they admit this or not, often experiences your progress as a quiet mirror, showing them a gap they have not closed in their own life. This is simply how the untrained mind works. It compares. It measures itself against the people closest to it, because those are the people it has the most data on. The Stoics were relentless about separating what is within your control from what is not. Your discipline, your effort, your choices, your character, these are yours. Other people's reactions to your discipline are not yours. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that other people's actions and judgments belong to them, not to him, and that trying to control those reactions was both wasted energy and a distraction from his own duty. This single distinction removes an enormous weight from your shoulders. You're not responsible for managing how comfortable other people feel about your growth. You are responsible only for whether that growth is honest, useful, and aligned with virtue. Understanding this shift early prevents years of confusion and self-doubt. Many people, upon sensing this cooling from loved ones, assume something is wrong with them. They slow down. They shrink their ambitions. They apologize for wanting more quietly through their actions without ever naming what they're doing. But the Stoic path asks for the opposite response. Notice the shift. Understand its cause with clear eyes and no bitterness. And continue anyway, because your obligation was never to keep everyone comfortable with your pace. Your obligation is to live according to reason and virtue, regardless of who finds that inconvenient. Number 2, why fear of losing you feels like reduced support. Beneath the surface of most cooling relationships is a fear that rarely gets spoken aloud, the fear of being left behind. When someone you love starts improving their life, disciplining their habits, expanding their circle, or reaching goals that once felt distant, an unspoken question can form in the people around them. Will they still need me? Will they still choose me when they have more options, more confidence, more of a life that does not depend on this relationship the way it used to? This fear does not usually show up as a direct statement. It shows up as subtle withdrawal, as a slight coolness, as comments that sound like concern but function like resistance. The Stoics would call this fear a disturbance rooted in attachment to something outside one's control, specifically attachment to another person's presence and behavior remaining fixed. Epictetus used the example of a favorite cup. If you love a cup, love it as a cup, so that when it breaks, you are not destroyed. He was not telling people to love less. He was telling people to love with clear understanding of what is and is not permanent, and what is and is not theirs to control. A relationship built on the unspoken condition that you never change, never grow, never outgrow certain patterns is a relationship built on fragile ground. Fear of your success is often fear that the terms of that fragile arrangement are shifting. It is worth sitting with this honestly rather than judging the people who feel it. Fear of abandonment is one of the oldest human fears, wired in long before philosophy existed to explain it. A parent who has organized decades of identity around being needed can feel destabilized when a child becomes fully capable. A friend who has built a friendship around shared struggle can feel unmoored when one person breaks out of that struggle first. A partner who equates love with dependence can feel threatened by a partner who no longer needs rescuing. None of this makes their fear noble, but it does make it understandable, and understanding it without excusing it is exactly the kind of clear thinking Stoicism asks of you. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to approach difficult people not with contempt, but with a recognition that they are like him, doing what seems right to them, however mistaken. This is not permission to tolerate poor treatment indefinitely. It is a tool for staying calm and clear rather than becoming resentful or defensive. When you see someone's coolness toward your success as coming from fear rather than malice, you stop taking it as evidence that something is wrong with you, and you stop needing to punish them for it. You simply see it clearly, name it internally, and decide how to respond according to reason rather than hurt pride. There is a difference between reassuring someone and abandoning your growth to soothe their fear. Reassurance says, I still value this relationship. I'm not disappearing. Your place in my life has not been erased. Abandonment says, I will shrink myself so you never have to feel uncertain again. The first is compassionate and consistent with Stoic virtue because it maintains honesty and care without sacrificing your own development. The second corrodes you slowly because it asks you to treat someone else's discomfort as more important than your own alignment with reason and purpose. Seneca warned repeatedly against organizing your life around the anxieties of others, since anxiety, once accommodated, only asks for more accommodation. The Stoic response to this fear in others is neither cruelty nor collapse. It is steady presence. You continue showing up, continue offering honest care, continue being reliable in the ways that matter, while continuing to grow regardless of whether that growth is fully understood or appreciated in the moment. Over time, Most fear like this either resolves as the person adjusts to a new equilibrium, or it reveals a relationship that was never built on anything solid enough to survive change in the first place. Either outcome gives you clarity. Neither outcome should slow down a life being lived with intention. Number 3. The Stoic distinction between approval and virtue. One of the most practical tools Stoicism offers for this exact situation is the clean separation between living virtuously and being approved of. Modern life blurs these two things constantly, teaching people, often without saying so directly, that being good and being liked are the same pursuit. They are not. A person can act with total integrity, discipline, and honesty, and still fail to receive approval from people who are uncomfortable with what that integrity reveals about their own choices. Chasing approval as if it were the same thing as virtue is one of the fastest ways to abandon your own path in order to keep others comfortable. Epictetus divided the world into what is up to us and what is not up to us, and he placed other people's opinions firmly in the second category. Your effort, your honesty, your choices, your daily discipline, these are up to you completely. Whether your mother is proud, whether your old friend is happy for you, whether your partner feels secure, these are shaped by many factors that have nothing to do with your character and everything to do with their own inner state. Confusing these two categories is the root of an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering, because people spend years trying to control something that was never within their control to begin with. This does not mean other people's feelings do not matter. It means their feelings are not the measuring stick for whether your actions are right. A doctor delivering hard but necessary advice is not acting wrongly simply because the patient does not want to hear it. A person pursuing an honest, disciplined life is not acting wrongly simply because someone nearby feels uncomfortable watching them do it. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and much of the suffering people feel around disapproval from loved ones comes from imagining catastrophic consequences of that disapproval rather than looking honestly at what is actually happening, which is often simply discomfort that will pass with time. There is a quiet trap in trying to earn universal approval before pursuing your goals. It sets an impossible condition, because approval from every person who matters to you is never guaranteed, no matter how well you behave or how much success you achieve. Some people will resent you for trying. Some will resent you for succeeding. Some would resent you even if you failed, because your effort alone threatens their own inertia. Waiting for unanimous approval before living fully is waiting for something that may never arrive, and Stoicism teaches that a life spent waiting for permission from others is a life spent outsourcing your own judgment. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling an empire, wrote privately about the need to focus on his own actions and character rather than the shifting opinions of those around him, including people whose approval would have seemed enormously important to secure. If a man with that much power and that much scrutiny needed to remind himself daily not to be governed by outside opinion, it is worth taking seriously how much discipline this distinction actually requires. It is not natural. It has to be practiced deliberately, especially with people whose opinions carry emotional weight because you love them. None of this is an argument for coldness or indifference to the people you care about. It is an argument for correctly ordering your priorities. Virtue first, because that is fully within your control and fully your responsibility. Compassion and patience for others' reactions second, because you can offer understanding without surrendering direction. Approval last, because it was never guaranteed, never fully controllable, and never actually the measure of whether your life is being lived well. When you internalize this order, the cooling reactions of people around you lose their power to derail you, because you stop mistaking their comfort for your compass. Number 4, how to stay kind without shrinking yourself. The hardest part of this entire situation is not understanding it intellectually. It is living it out without becoming bitter, defensive, or cold toward the very people whose support you wish you had. Many people, once they notice fear or resentment in someone close to them, swing toward one of two extremes. Either they shrink themselves back down to a size that feels safe for everyone else, or they harden completely, cutting people off and treating every hint of discomfort as betrayal. Stoicism offers a third path, one that is more difficult and more honest than either extreme, which is to remain kind, remain steady, and remain unshaken in your direction all at the same time. Marcus Aurelius wrote about meeting difficult behavior with patience and clarity rather than matching its energy. This does not mean tolerating disrespect indefinitely. It means responding to fear-based coldness with calm rather than escalation, because escalation only confirms the other person's fear that you have changed into someone harder to reach. Staying warm while staying firm is one of the most demanding disciplines a person can practice, because it requires holding two things at once: compassion for someone's fear and commitment to your own growth, without letting either one collapse into the other. Practically, this looks like continuing to show up for the relationship in the ways that are genuinely yours to give: time, honesty, attention, care, while refusing to shrink your ambitions, dim your discipline, or apologize for choices that harm no one. It means noticing when a joke at your expense carries an edge and addressing it directly and calmly rather than either exploding or silently absorbing it. It means being generous with reassurance when reassurance is warranted, telling someone plainly that your growth does not mean you're leaving them behind, while also being clear, calmly, and without cruelty that you will not stop growing in order to make anyone more comfortable. Seneca often wrote to friends about the importance of choosing companions carefully, since the people closest to you shape your habits and your thinking more than almost anything else. This is not a call to abandon people the moment they show fear or hesitation about your growth. It is a reminder that some relationships, over time, will reveal themselves to be incompatible with the direction your life is taking, and recognizing this clearly, without drama, is far healthier than pretending otherwise for years out of guilt or obligation. Kindness does not require you to sacrifice your future for someone else's comfort with the present. There is real wisdom in giving people time to adjust. Fear responses are rarely permanent. A parent who initially reacts with worry to a child's ambitious plans often comes around once they see stability rather than recklessness. A friend who initially withdraws often returns once they realize your growth was never a rejection of them. Patience, paired with consistency, allows people the room to work through their own discomfort without you having to manage that discomfort for them. This patience is not passive. It is an active discipline, choosing not to react defensively while still refusing to retreat from your own path. The goal is not to win every person over or to prove your growth is harmless. The goal is to remain the kind of person who can hold steady under discomfort without becoming someone unrecognizable, either shrunk down out of guilt or hardened out of resentment. This balance, warmth without weakness, direction without cruelty, is exactly what the Stoics practiced under far greater pressures than a cool reaction from a loved one. If they could hold that balance while running empires or facing exile, it is available to you while simply choosing to keep building your life. Number 5, building an inner fortress that doesn't need external validation. Everything discussed so far points toward one final, essential shift, moving the foundation of your confidence from outside validation to inside conviction. As long as your sense of being on the right path depends on visible enthusiasm from the people around you, you remain vulnerable to every mood, insecurity, and fear that passes through them. The Stoics called this building an inner citadel, a place of judgment and character that external events, including other people's approval or disapproval, cannot break into or shake loose. This is not arrogance or isolation. It is stability, the kind that allows you to keep loving people honestly without needing their permission to keep growing. Marcus Aurelius wrote directly about retreating into this inner space, noting that nowhere can a person find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than within their own mind, especially one stocked with sound judgments that produce immediate calm. This inner space is built deliberately through the daily practice of separating what belongs to you, your effort, your integrity, your discipline, from what is not, the reactions and fears of everyone around you. Each time you correctly make this separation instead of getting entangled in someone else's discomfort, the citadel gets a little stronger and a little harder to shake. This inner strength changes how you experience the cooling reactions discussed throughout this video. Instead of interpreting a loved one's hesitation as proof you are doing something wrong, you interpret it accurately, as fear passing through someone who has not yet built their own version of this same inner stability. Instead of needing them to catch up before you feel confident continuing, you continue regardless because your confidence was never actually built on their applause. It was built on alignment between your actions and your values, something no external reaction can grant or take away once it is genuinely established within you. Epictetus taught that the things which upset us are usually our judgments about events rather than the events themselves, and this applies powerfully here. A cool reaction from someone you love is an event. The judgment that this means you are wrong, selfish, or ungrateful is a separate thing entirely, added by your own mind, and it can be examined and released with practice. Training yourself to notice the difference between what happened and the story you immediately attach to it is one of the most powerful tools available for staying steady when people closest to you react with fear instead of celebration. Building this inner fortress does not mean becoming indifferent to the people you love. It means loving them from a place of strength rather than dependence. A person with genuine inner stability can offer more patience, more generosity, and more understanding to a fearful loved one than a person who is constantly checking that loved one's face for permission to keep going. Ironically, the less you need their approval to feel secure in your path, the more capacity you have to be genuinely present, warm, and helpful to them as they work through their own fear, because you're no longer distracted by managing your own anxiety about their reaction. In the end, the people who love you most rarely fear your success out of malice. They fear it because change is unsettling, because comparison is a habit of the untrained mind, and because love, when built on old patterns, resists anything that asks those patterns to shift. Your task, as the Stoics understood clearly, is not to eliminate this fear in others. It is to keep building your own inner steadiness so thoroughly that their fear no longer has the power to slow your growth, while your patience and honesty give them every reasonable chance to grow alongside you. That combination, unwavering direction paired with genuine compassion, is what a Stoic life actually looks like in practice. There is no version of growth that comes without some friction from the people around you. This is not a flaw in your relationships or a sign that something has gone wrong. It is simply the cost of change, paid quietly in small moments of hesitation from people who are still adjusting to a version of you they have not met yet. Once you accept this as a normal part of moving forward, rather than as evidence that you're doing something wrong, the whole experience loses most of its sting. You stop searching every raised eyebrow for proof of betrayal, and you start seeing it for what it usually is, an ordinary human reaction to an unfamiliar situation. The Stoics never asked anyone to stop loving people or to stop caring what happened to them. They asked for something more precise, which is to place your peace of mind on the one thing that is actually yours to control, your own effort and character, and to hold everything else, including the reactions of the people closest to you, a little more loosely. This is not distance. It is clarity. It lets you keep showing up for the people you love without making your own direction dependent on their comfort with it. Real strength is rarely announced with grand declarations. It looks like continuing to work quietly at your goals on a day when no one noticed. It looks like staying gentle with someone who reacted with fear instead of joy, without abandoning what you were building. It looks like choosing again and again to measure your life by your own standards rather than by the temperature of the room around you. That kind of steadiness cannot be given to you by anyone else, and it cannot be taken away either once it is genuinely yours. So keep going. Let people catch up in their own time or don't, and either way, keep building the life that reason and character are asking you to build. The fear you sense in others is not a signal to slow down. It is simply a sign that you are moving, and movement always disturbs the air around it. If this brought you the clarity you needed today, like this video and subscribe to the channel, because this is exactly the kind of steady, practical wisdom we return to here week after week.